Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be diving into something. Well, it's not exactly a light topic, but it's an important one. We're digging into the world of federal budgeting. Yeah. And before you switch those dials, thinking boring, trust me, this one gets interesting. We're talking about an article you guys sent over from Mother Jones, all about Russell Vought. And this guy, some people are saying he could be the architect of a second Trump presidency.
Yeah, that's right. We often focus on the really big names in politics, but sometimes the real power. It lies with the people who actually understand how the machinery of government works. And Vought is one of those guys, particularly when it comes to the budget process. And this is what I find so interesting. He's not just a numbers guy. This isn't just about balancing the books for him. He has a plan. He wants to use the budget to reshape America.
Yeah, the article really paints him as this kind of shadow power player. It even mentions that he was in the running to be Trump's chief of staff during the first term, which, I mean, that's pretty inside baseball, right? And then on top of that, you've got this whole other layer where he's a devout Christian nationalist, which I'm not saying that's inherently a bad thing, but it definitely adds a whole other dimension to things.
It's really fascinating how he brings together that deep religious conviction with this really deep understanding of the budget and how to use it to his advantage. It's he's not just aiming for a balanced budget. He sees it as a tool to make his worldview a reality.
So the article mentions this plan called Schedule F that Vought was pushing for. And honestly, I had never even heard of it before reading this article. But now that I know a little more about it, well, it's got me a little nervous. Can you break down for us what Schedule F actually is and why people are so worried about it?
Yeah. So Schedule F was an executive order. It was actually issued while Trump was still in office. And basically, it would have reclassified thousands of federal employees. And the point of that was to make it easier to fire them. And not just fire them, but replace them with people deemed more loyal to the administration.
Hold on. So you're saying they could just get rid of all these experienced people and just replace them with whoever they wanted?
That was the idea. And Vought was one of the main people pushing for it. And what's even more concerning is that he's hinted that if Trump gets reelected, they're going to try to bring it back.
So basically, they'd be bypassing the whole civil service system and just installing people who agree with their ideology.
Exactly. And that's what has a lot of people worried. Critics are saying that Schedule F would completely politicize the government. You'd have people who are loyal, yes, but they might not have the experience or the expertise. Imagine thousands of scientists at the CDC, or career diplomats at the State Department, or economists at the Federal Reserve, all replaced with political appointees who might not actually know what they're doing.
Okay. Yeah, that's a chilling thought. And it's not like Vought is shying away from this disruptor image. There's this one quote from the article that really stuck with me. He said, "I love to cut spending wherever it is, and I like to cut spending the most in the bureaucracy."
Yeah, that quote really sums up his whole approach. He sees government bureaucracy as the enemy and spending cuts as his weapon.
But it's not just about slashing and burning for the sake of it, right? This all seems very strategic.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't random. Vaught's actions are very much driven by his Christian nationalist beliefs. He sees this as a way to push his vision of what America should be.
So it's not just about I don't know, just mindless cuts, right?
Yeah.
There's a real ideology driving this.
Yeah, exactly. And to really grasp the potential impact here, we need to look at what Vought is actually targeting. It's not just about line item vetoes. We're talking about potentially defunding entire agencies. The EPA, the Department of Education, parts of the Justice Department, anything he sees as opposed to his worldview.
So it's really targeted. It's not just about cutting spending. It's about cutting spending in a way that advances his agenda.
Exactly. He sees these cuts as a way to fundamentally shrink the government, especially the parts that he sees as obstacles to his ideology.
And it's not just theoretical. Like the article mentioned, he was super involved in that whole debt ceiling showdown a few months back. Honestly, I kind of tuned it out at the time. It felt like the same old political theater. But knowing that Vought was right in the middle of it all, kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes, that's a little unnerving.
Oh, he was a major player in that whole thing, pushing for the most extreme cuts possible. Remember those hardline House Republicans who basically forced out their own speaker over this?
Vaguely.
Well, Vought is very much aligned with that faction. He's willing to push things to the brink, even if it means risking the entire economy. And that kind of brinkmanship, it has real-world consequences.
Yeah, for sure. And it's clear from the article that this isn't just Vought going rogue. He's got powerful allies. He's part of this whole network of conservative think tanks and influencers.
Yeah.
And get this, the article mentions something called Project 2025. Which honestly sounds a little ominous, like some kind of doomsday prepper plan.
Well, it's not quite doomsday, but it's not far off. Project 2025 is basically a massive policy initiative. It's being spearheaded by a bunch of conservative think tanks. The Heritage Foundation is one of the big ones. And when I say massive, I mean they've already drafted hundreds of executive orders and policy changes, all ready to go on day one if another Republican administration takes office.
Like, seriously, they've got it all planned out already.
Oh, yeah. They're not just hoping for the best. They're meticulously planning for a potential second Trump term. And Russell Vought is one of the architects. He's been writing chapters for their big policy playbook, giving speeches about crushing the deep state. He is all in on this.
Okay, see, this is what I'm talking about. They are playing 4D chess while everyone else is stuck on checkers. So what are some of the specifics they're cooking up in Project 2025? Like, what's actually on the menu for a second Trump term, according to Vought and his crew? So give us the rundown. What's on the menu if Vought and his crew get a second Trump term?
Well, they've been pretty secretive about the fine print,
Yes.
but based on what Vought said publicly, we're looking at basically taking everything from Trump's first term and turning it up to 11.
Escalation. How so? Like, give us specifics.
We'll take immigration, for example. Vought has talked about mass deportations, using the military at the border, not just for security, but to actually round up and deport people.
Oh, okay. And what else?
He wants to completely dismantle what he calls the administrative state. That means going after environmental regulations, worker protections, anything he sees as government overreach. And he's been very clear about wanting to purge anyone he sees as disloyal from the federal government. That's where his Schedule F plan comes back into play.
So basically, a second Trump term with Vought in charge could mean a systematic dismantling of federal agencies and a return to some of the most extreme policies we saw during Trump's first term.
And what's even more concerning is they've had 4 years to think about this. They've had time to figure out what worked, what didn't work, and how to be even more effective at pushing their agenda.
This is kind of blowing my mind. To be honest, I had never even heard of Russell Vought before this whole deep dive, and now I feel like I'm seeing this whole side of politics in a whole new light.
It's definitely eye-opening.
It's a little terrifying, but also empowering to understand how these power dynamics actually work.
That's the power of knowledge, right? Understanding these behind-the-scenes players like Vought, it's crucial to really understanding the forces that are shaping our world, even if we don't always see their names in the headlines.
For sure. For sure. Any final thoughts for our listeners? Something to chew on after we've sufficiently freaked them out about Schedule F and these shadowy figures behind Project 2025.
I think the big takeaway here is that Vought is part of a much larger trend of using seemingly boring parts of government, like the budget process to achieve ideological goals. He's not the only one doing this. It's a reminder that a lot of power operates behind the scenes, and we need to pay attention to who's pulling the strings, even if they're not the loudest voices in the room.
Well said.
Yeah.
This has been a fascinating and honestly kind of unsettling look at Russell Vought and what a potential second Trump term could look like with him at the helm. Until next time, keep those thinking caps on.